Alright guys, welcome back to another one. So we have to talk about the PC version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that was announced at the Game Awards. In fact, Square Enix's only announcement at TGA, but a pretty exciting announcement nonetheless. This isn't just a simple port of the game to PC with all of the standard enhancements and upgrades that you would expect from a PC version, like increased frame rate and resolution, but rather, this is looking like Square Enix's most ambitious PC version of any of their games yet, above what's capable on the PlayStation 5 version. From what we know, Square Enix have actually gone in and spent quite a bit of extra time working on enhancing this version of the game. And I do hope that for any of their Unreal Engine games going forward, as Rebirth is running on UE4, I hope this acts as a precedent for future PC versions. I'm looking at you, Kingdom Hearts 4. The two official comparisons that we have right here show a stunning night and day difference between the PC version to the PS5 version. Looking at this, it instantly reminds me of those comparisons that we used to do of one console generation to another, specifically looking at PS3 games and PS4 games that were multi-platform. It almost gives vibes of an entire generation leap. That is how significant the upgrade here on the PC version is. We can now notice the individual strands of Cloud's hair. Detail in general, like the actual skin pores of the character model, are actually visible. Colors are a lot more vibrant. Background clarity has been significantly improved, being able to make out more details that are off in the distance and just clarity overall. But what is one of the most obvious and significant improvements here to the PC version is the overhauled lighting. Square Enix mentions that lighting has been adjusted and the game's overall rendering of light is significantly improved. The updated areas and cutscenes present with even greater beauty and clarity than before. Rebirth had some really strange issues with its lighting, where it would make things within the environment, and especially character models, look really strange and almost low detail. Good lighting can actually make all the difference when it comes to visuals in video games. This is a really important aspect, and it's especially apparent when you compare Final Fantasy VII Remake's lighting to Rebirth's lighting. It almost comes across as Remake looking like the more visually impressive game due to its better lighting. Now, you do have to take into account that Remake and Rebirth are very different when it comes to the format of these games. Rebirth has very wide open areas, almost being open world, whereas Remake is very linear. So a greater amount of power is required in order to bring Rebirth's lighting up to Remake's. This is where the PC version shines the absolute most, because it looks like we've basically got what is beyond what we saw with Remake's lighting here in the PC version of Rebirth, and it makes all the difference. When we're talking about clarity, it is an obvious thing to expect when playing on a PC version of a game, being able to run the game at a much higher resolution. Even though the PlayStation 5 Pro does bring quite an obvious difference to the base PlayStation 5 experience of Rebirth, improving upon the clarity, which was one of the biggest complaints towards Rebirth when it first launched on the base PlayStation 5 model. That clarity is improved even furthermore because it is a true native 4K and not upscaled via PSSR. PS5 Pro doesn't actually run the game at a native 4K, but rather an upscaled 4K with improved clarity and being able to run the game at 60 frames per second. Still though, it's a big upgrade compared to the performance mode on base PS5, which was a very blurry and hazy experience. But it isn't just like a simple resolution bump, because Square Enix have explained that they've actually increased both polygon and texture density across the board throughout everything in the game for the PC version. From time to time, you do see developers doing this for their PC version, but it's not always commonplace, so it's nice to know that Square Enix actually took the time out to further enhance literally everything in the game. And especially when you look at past PC versions of Square Enix games, looking at Final Fantasy 15, 16, and Kingdom Hearts 3, the enhancements that we're seeing here for Rebirth weren't a thing for those PC versions. Square Enix didn't do anything extra other than the usual things you come to expect from a PC version for those titles. Hence why I'm saying for any PC versions going forward, specifically UE, as again Rebirth is UE, I hope to see that Square Enix will put in the same amount of attention, love, and care. I should mention though that Final Fantasy 15 did receive an official 4K texture pack upon its release on PC, but it still wasn't to the degree of Square Enix going in and redoing textures along with increasing polygon count. When I first played through Rebirth, I mentioned that it is a very stunning looking game. Even with the blurry experience of base PS5 performance mode, I genuinely do think that this is one of Square Enix's most visually impressive titles. Part of that was envisioning the game running on stronger hardware with improvements and much better clarity, as that was one of the glaring issues. So to have these texture improvements on top of an overhauled lighting system and much improved clarity, I do think that Rebirth will be put into that category of one of the most stunning looking games and by far one of the best looking Square Enix titles. Now this is a no-brainer and a thing you should expect for PC versions nowadays, but NVIDIA DLSS and variable refresh rates are here in Rebirth. So if you're wanting to achieve high frame rates with the stunning looking visuals, DLSS is going to help out with that. Square Enix have also dropped the official recommended specs for the game, and it's nice to see a wide range of compatibility from low to high. If you are wanting to play at 60 frames 4K, you are looking at an AMD 79 or an RTX 4080, and for CPU, a Ryzen 7 5700X or an Intel i7. Now here's the thing, I know people are going to be a little bit worried about the performance of this game, given the performance of Final Fantasy 16 on PC. Now for me, my experience of 16 on PC was incredibly smooth, and in my video talking about the PC version, I actually dubbed it as being a very well optimized PC port. The only reason why I was having a smooth experience was because of the parts that were in my ring, but for a lot of people, they came across a ton of performance issues. The optimization across the board for 16, or at least initially, wasn't great. Keep in mind that 16 is actually running on one of Square Enix's own proprietary engines. It's not actually running on Unreal Engine. Still to this day, we don't know exactly what engine 16 runs on, but it's assumed that it's a modified version of the Luminos engine. UE4's got some pretty great compatibility and optimization features, and this is why a lot of devs choose to use this engine. It is the most used game engine in the industry. So I do have faith that for 7 Rebirth, it'll be a much better optimized experience, at least in the beginning, compared to 16 Remake. I mean, UE4 does come along with its own share of issues when games do get PC ports, so don't go into this expecting there won't be any issues, but I think it will be a lot better than what we saw with 16. The last thing to look forward to about the PC version here is mods, especially considering that Final Fantasy VII Remake's mod scene is quite large, with almost 1,500 mods currently available on the Nexus. It's quite a large community, and I would say this same amount, if not further dedication, will be applied to Rebirth. In general too, because Rebirth is more of an open game with these smallish open world areas, there's a lot more potential for mods here in Rebirth than there was for Remake. The other great thing about this too is it really seems as if Square Enix are getting their PC ports out even quicker. Starting with Kingdom Hearts 3, that game took just over 2 years to get its PC version. 7 Remake took about a year and a half. For Final Fantasy 16, it was just under a year and a half. Here for Rebirth, we're seeing an 11-month period between the console version to the PC version. The gap between the console to PC version here is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Of course, we have to keep in mind that Square Enix do have a timed exclusivity contract, at least looking at the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, but for games that aren't bound to a Sony contract, it seems like there is going to be a much shorter gap between console to PC version, or maybe, with Square Enix's new multi-platform focus in mind, a simultaneous day one release. This is most definitely something I hope for when looking at Kingdom Hearts 4. However, this is looking like the most impressive PC port of any Square Enix title thus far. I simply can't wait to experience it for myself. This is without a doubt above and beyond the definitive version, as it usually goes for PC versions, but to know that Square Enix put some additional love into making a game that already looks pretty fantastic, even better, is a nice thing to know. And again, I hope they apply the same amount of love to their PC ports going forward. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Drop a like if you enjoyed, it helps me out, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're looking for more TGJ, check out my other social media platforms, all links below. A big thank you to my wonderful patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk real soon.